Thomas here with Much Props, going to give you another how-to video. Today I am building SpongeBob.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah. I bought an extra shadow box when I was making my mother's boss key from The Legend of Zelda. It was oversized and I bought two not knowing exactly which size shadow box I would need. So there has been a shadow box sitting directly off behind you. And it's just been kind of staring at me, waiting for me to build something into it. So I thought, why not make SpongeBob trapped in the shadow box? That is the premise for this build. There are free templates down in the description below if you would like to make your own SpongeBob. So without further ado, let's get down to the bikini bottoms and get to building. Here is a shadow box that has been staring at me for the past couple of weeks. It's an 11 by 14 inch frame and has about 2 inches of depth to it. That's important to know as I draw up the plans for my SpongeBob so that I know roughly how far I need to estimate the size of each of the parts. This pattern is free and linked down in the description below the video. You can also find all my patterns on my website at www.muchpropstudios.com. It's also linked down in the description below. With a pattern in hand, I can now trace it all onto my materials. I'm using various thicknesses of EVA foam to construct my SpongeBob. I've labeled what thicknesses I used on each piece of the pattern to make it easy for you. If you can't find those thicknesses where you're at, you can always just glue stacks of EVA together to make up the difference, or find a different material entirely to build your thing out of. I trace all the parts onto the foam and roughly cut them out with a sharp hobby knife or box cutter. A lot of these parts need to be rounded over or may need further refinement of their form. I use a sanding drum on my rotary tool to get it closer to the final shape, and then use a stone bit to smooth over all the rough marks left by the sanding drum. Make sure to wear a respirator and work in a well ventilated area while sanding EVA foam. You don't want to breathe in the particles. Assembly for this one is a little bit of modifications as you go. The top layer goes down relatively smooth. I put on contact cement on both parts, let it sit for a few minutes until it's no longer wet, tack the parts together, and then sand over any proud edges. The rest of the parts I figure out placement, trace it, and I may have to sand the backs of certain parts to make them sit flat on each other. The nose and the cheeks were probably the trickiest part to figure out. For his mouth, I burnt in some lines for his smile with my wood burner. Make sure to put that respirator back on because the fumes of burning foam are pretty nasty. I sand down the bottom of that line so that my teeth can look like they are protruding from that opening. For little parts, I super glue them into place instead of contact cement. It just kind of works a little faster. His tie, collar, and other various add-ons get glued in or burned on in a similar fashion. For his legs, I need them to bend out a little, so I cut a wedge off the top to make the short legs come out at a slight angle. For the shirt sleeve that comes out of his jaw for some reason, I had to sand back a little bump into the side of it so that it sits flush with the chiseled, spongy side. Here I am trying to figure out his arms and legs and how they will attach to his hands and feet. I drilled in a small recess into each part so that my 20mm EVA dowels will fit snug into them. The recess will help support the connection a little more and make it less likely to pop off. I have my shadow box handy so I know exactly how much space I have to play with for the length of his legs and his arms. I heat up the parts a little to add bends and add a little super glue on the inside of his arm fold to hold the position of his hands in place. I covered him in Mod Podge mainly to fill any gaps that I might have had from where my parts didn't lay flush on top of each other. This took a couple of hours to fully set up. Two coats of Plasti Dip. Then I hit the whole thing with some yellow spray paint. The color isn't exactly the shade I was going for, but it'll save me a couple of layers of acrylic paint to get to the shade that I need to be over the top of black Plasti Dip. I mix up paints as I go to get it relatively close to what the reference images are. With the base colors down, I can mix white or darker colors to add shades or tints to those base colors and roughly make some cartoonish shading over the top. I make this kind of sporadic and not really planned out. I also add other details like his eyes, belt, cheeks, chin, sock stripes, and outline him to pull the finished paint job more into the cartoon world. The last step is simply to glue him to the backing of the shadow box and close it up. Hopefully you enjoyed this build. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below, and if the build tickles your fancy, please share it with others, subscribe, comment, etc, etc. Every little bit helps my channel to keep chugging along, growing, and putting out more videos. And we are finished. Here is the end result. Overall, I think it turned out pretty cool. It's definitely something a bit derpy and that could easily be done in a matter of a few hours, at least the build part. I did spend a little bit of time painting him today, which took me quite a while, just trying to get all the colors and things. Because most of him was very light, it took multiple passes with some of those acrylics, but yeah. Maybe you will try and make one of these yourselves and impress your friends with your ability to pull something from one of your favorite cartoons and bring it into the real world and trap it in a box and keep it forever. Well, yeah. Maybe you'll get some... I need it! And inevitably, they're going to ask you, how'd you make that? You can give them one of these. Tell them, much props. Now I got to go clean the glass again. Okay. Here, you hold SpongeBob. If you enjoy what I do here on YouTube and want to see more builds like this one, please consider joining these awesome people listed here with me over on my Patreon to build a bigger, better, more creative community together.